Hello friends, how are you all doing? Sorry again for taking so long to make a video, but I've been very busy with some personal issues that are taking me a lot of time, so I'm sorry about that, but that's the way life works. Well, finally today I'm going to show you this comparison that I've been requested to make about the Rolex Explorer, the Ranger, and the Summiteer and the Alpinist. I want to compare them. First, this is not a review or anything like that. This is just, it's a review of some of the characteristics of the watches, but it's not a review of the watches by themselves. This is a comparison about how they stack against each other when talking about adventure and exploring from the romantic point of view. What I mean by this is these watches as watches that you would take hiking to the mountain, to glaciers, to the forest, to when you're traveling to strange and different places. Not as watches alone, but as watches for a purpose, as tool watches. So I'm going to compare several features of the watches, the design language and all that stuff. I will discuss it. I will make a general score about them. Of course, I try to be objective, but I'm sure I'm not. So you take your own conclusions, because there are some things that for me are more important than others. So this is not to make one watch better or worse, but just my impressions and how I think they are really as adventure watches. Now, let's check it out. Quite a few of categories that we have to go through. So let's start with the first one, which is proportions, height of the watch, lug to lug, diameter in general. And here the Summiteer takes the lead. The reason is it's a very thin watch. It's 10.5 millimeters high and 36.5 millimeters in diameter, which makes it a very nice compact watch. Then we have the Explorer with 36 millimeters in diameter and 11.6 millimeters high. Also a very comfortable lug-to-lug distance. Then we have the Ranger and the Alpinist. The Ranger is 39 millimeters and 12 high, and the Alpinist 38 and 12 high. But somehow the Alpinist with the second crown makes it a little bit bulkier somehow, and the proportions can be not as good as the Ranger, but by a small margin. By wrist fatigue, I mean how do you feel the watch and your wrist after having it for a long period of time through many miles traveling or walking or whatever. And here I have to say that the Explorer is the best one. It's the most comfortable watch I have ever worn. I'm very close behind its Summiteer, and considering the height, I have to give them 10 points. After that, there is the Ranger, which the size kind of penalizes a little bit, and the Alpinist, I'm not sure why, but it's the least comfortable of the bunch. And I think the reason is because the back of the case of the Alpinist is the wider one, the one that keeps more metal against your wrist, and you can tell that after a long period of time. When exploring or traveling, your watch is going to be in contact with many surfaces and stuff around. So being able to handle scratches, I think it's very important. Now the Summiteer with the hardened steel is 1200 Vickers, which makes it very scratch resistant, so it's a great option and keeps the 10 points. Then we have the Ranger, which is all brushed. You don't notice the scratches in the watch. After that, of course, we have the Alpinist, that with the polished bezel you can tell the scratches, but still very manageable with the 31L steel. And the last one is the Explorer, which has the 904L steel, which is very soft, and the moment you touch anything with the watch, you're going to get a scratch. And I really think that's a shame because, an exploring watch should be, tougher. That's all. Now, I believe that water resistance is a very important feature in an exploring watch. And I am happy to say that all of the watches have excellent water resistance. Explorer, Summiteer and Ranger, they have 100 meters water resistance. Maybe I should have added another point to the Explorer having this double lock system, but well, that's you can imagine that you can subtract or add a few points afterwards. I have to give 10 points to the Alpinist because it has an outstanding 200 meters of water resistance. I know, dial legibility is going to be controversial, but bear with me. Well, first, I have to say that the Ranger has the best legibility of all of the watches. You can read the time in any situation with any kind of light at a glance. It's very easy to read. The bold numbers and hour and minute hands are also something that really helps in this case. The Summiteer is also very easy to read, and it only gets 1 point less, only because of the size, purely by the size, because the hands are really easy to distinguish. This is a great watch to read at a glance also. The Alpinist is not far behind, but the readability in some situations with the polished hour markers can be a little bit confusing sometimes. This is something that also happens with the Explorer, as I will explain. Readability is quite alright, but at a glance it's not as good as the Ranger or the Summiteer. Now here I come with one of my main complaints with the Explorer. Yes, I know that people like applied hour markers, but polished hour markers can confuse what you are seeing at a glance if you have poor eyesight or the light is poor. So if you're not able to focus quickly, it's not that easy to distinguish the markers from the hour and minute hands. And I know this is no concern for a lot of people, but bear in mind that when you get poor eyesight, when you get older, this can turn to be a little bit of an issue. But now comes the second part, which is the area where you have the logo of Rolex, the crown. That logo and the name Rolex and everything is very bold and white, that when you are not able to focus or to see from a short distance, it really confuses you what time it is between 11 and 1. So it's really hard to tell where the hour hand really is with all that white and letters going on there. Should be a little bit thinner. I think it would be much easier to read, like the logo in the Traska or in the Ranger. Again, this is no concern for a lot of people, but when you get older and your eyesight grows weaker, this is going to be important. And more importantly, this is something that doesn't happen with the other watches. Let's talk about the Lume. The Lume in the Explorer is excellent. It is very consistent all through the night. It's the one that loses less brightness during the night. But on the other hand, the minute hand is a little bit too narrow, so it's a little bit harder to read sometimes. One thing for the other. Still a solid 9 because the chromalite is excellent and it's also beautiful. The Summiteer has a very reasonable lume, easy to read because both the hour and the minute hand are quite broad. It's not as long lasting as the chromalite from the Explorer, but nevertheless very capable, also considering that all the numerals, the block applied numerals, are filled with lume. Excellent all through the night. And so is the Ranger. It doesn't have applied indices, but still there is generous amount of lume in the numerals, very bold numerals. And the hour hand is especially prominent. And the minute hand is alright. It's not the best, but in general, all through the night, easy to read, gets a 9. And we end up with the Alpinist, which it has the proprietary lume that is very bright, but it only has the dots with lume, and all the dots are the same in all the hours, so it's harder to know what time exactly it is if you have the watch in a strange position, but still bright, still easy to read. If you know exactly where the 12 should be. If they had put 2 dots at 12 o'clock, it would have been much better, but that's the way it is. So a 7, which is not bad for the watch. And now let's talk about the power reserve. This is pretty straightforward because Both the Explorer and the Ranger, they all have around 70 hours power reserve, while the Summiteer has 42 and the Alpinist around 50. I think 52 or something like that. That's a pretty straightforward number, so let's move to the next thing. Now, anti-magnetism is quite important for this type of watches because they are going to be in certain environments or situations where there are magnetic fields, like when traveling in planes and trains, certain situations in the mountains where there can be rocks with magnetism, and many other situations. Today, most of modern watches have some magnetic protection, but here the Ranger and the Explorer, they both have silicon spring balance, which add more magnetism resistance that might be very convenient for this type of adventure watches. And now, of course, the precision of the movement. Here there is no surprise. The Explorer is outstanding. It runs -2 to +2 seconds a day, and it's very consistent. Also, the Ranger is very precise, slightly less precise than the Explorer, but still very precise and very reliable. The Summiteer and the Alpinist are a little bit all over the way. I mean, you can adjust them and they run pretty good, but of course not as good as either the Explorer or the Ranger. And while regards the movement there was no surprise, here we have one of the big issues with the Explorer, which is the strapability. Here we have a lot of problems with the Explorer. First, this has a 19mm lug width, which is odd and strange and really limits the amount of straps that you can use with the watch. Not only that, the case has a special shape and indent that scratches the straps, leather straps that you might put in, and the spring bar is too close to the case, making it really hard to pass NATOs or thicker straps. You sometimes need curved spring bars to change straps, and in general it's hard to remove the bracelet because of the tight tolerances, but well, that's okay because of the quality, but nevertheless it's really hard to put NATOs or single straps in this watch. It's not that you cannot do it, but it doesn't look right. This is a shame because this is a beautiful watch with a beautiful dial, and not being able to use your regular 20mm straps in it is a real shame. And not only that, it's not the lug holes is not in the best position for something like NATOs. It makes the watch float a little bit. It's a solid 1 here because this is a real shame and one of the most significant indicators that Rolex didn't want this watch to be a true adventure watch. Didn't want you to change the strap. The bracelet is great. It's one of the greatest, we will see that, but not being able to change straps in a simple way, it's a shame. Then we have the Summiteer with 20mm lugs, which allows to put all of or any of your 20mm straps with drill lugs, which is a great advantage to quickly change straps in a simple way in any situation. It gets a solid 8, and the Ranger gets a 10. Although it doesn't have drill lugs, what it has is a wide distance between the case and the spring bar, and the position of the lug holes is very low, so you can put any strap with total confidence. They are going to fit even thicker straps. It's very easy to change and they really flush with the contour of your wrist. It's an amazing watch to change straps by design, which is natural in an adventure watch. Also, the quality of the spring bars, both of the Explorer and the Ranger, is excellent. Now, about the Alpinist, it's also 20mm lug width, can put all your straps. The only minor thing is that the lug holes, they are a little bit higher than the ones on the Ranger. And not having drill lugs, it gets a 7, which is pretty reasonable for the watch. I also need to mention that the cases of the Alpinist, the Ranger and the Summiteer are designed in such a way that they allow the easy pass of NATOs and single straps with an angle at the bottom where the strap touches the case, which is great because this will protect the straps. Now the next category is a little bit strange. Let me explain. Replaceability, I mean what happens if you lose the watch, if you break it without possible repair, if you drop it in a river, if you lose it swimming, or if it gets stolen. How easy it is to replace the watch. This is very important for an adventure watch because this is something that really can happen. I mean, you can be climbing and fall from not very high and totally ruin and break the watch. So this is something to consider. I am going to go with a 7,000 euros watch to the mountain. What happens if I lose that watch? Here the Rolex loses again because it's not only expensive, it is harder to find and to get. I mean, now they are more common and easier to get at the IDs, but still not easy in all situations, and still about around 7,000 euros, which is a lot of money. Of course, the Summiteer comes the best one because it's very affordable. It's around 550 euros and it's usually on stock a couple of times a year. So easier to find, easier to get and to replace. The Ranger, it's surprisingly easier to replace than that you can expect because second-hand, there are many of them second-hand. You can buy them new from the ID easily and they are pretty affordable being second-hand. Actually, the one I have is second-hand. The Alpinist is not for sale like new anymore, so you can only get it second-hand and it's usually quite expensive and it's not easy to find examples in a good shape. So it gets a 6. Now, what I mean by adventure identity here, this is not how I feel the watches are, how I feel about them, but how I think the brands are seeing these models as adventure watches. And here we have to be honest. I don't think Rolex really believes that the Explorer is an exploring watch anymore. Other than the name, other than a true homage to exploring watches, it's not really designed, thought, or put in the market by Rolex to be used as an adventure watch. No matter what they say, that's not their intent. Their intent is to show a luxury product, a very beautiful watch, probably one of the most beautiful watches I have ever seen, but not as a true adventure watch, by themselves, by pure Rolex. Now, what about the Summiteer? Summiteer gets an 8, and that's strange because I really think that Traska believes this watch to be an adventure watch, but the latest changes in the watch have made it a little bit more luxurious, so to say, more elegant, a little bit more elegant, which is not a bad thing. It makes it a very versatile watch, one of the most versatile watches here. But I don't think they trust 100% this watch to be only in adventure environments. It's going to be a watch that you can use in any situation, which is great. So take this 8 like a little bit controversial. I don't really can make my mind around it, but I don't feel it like pure adventure watch like the Ranger and the Alpinist. Both Ranger and Alpinist are thought, designed and sold, and the brands believe they're true adventure watches. That's how they perceive them. The Alpinist, of course, everybody knows this is a true, pure adventure watch, and the Ranger is the same way, only more solid and more expensive and some specific characteristics. But both Ranger and Alpinist are designed to be adventure watches, reliable adventure watches for all situations, adventure and exploring related. Again, the Summiteer is almost there, and I think it's very versatile, which is a good thing for the Summiteer, which can handle more elegant situations, not like the Ranger or the Alpinist. And the Explorer is a watch to be used in more comfortable places, life adventure, life exploration, visiting nice cities, museums, coffees. Not true adventure, not the adventure in the romantic sense, like I'm trying to highlight in this review. Of course, this doesn't mean at all that you cannot use the Explorer as a true adventure watch. Of course you can. It's going to work on that situation. But it's not that Rolex really believes that that is the real reason for this watch to exist. And sorry for this rant. I had to say it. I now talk about the last thing, which is the bracelets, the OM bracelet and straps of the watches. And here I have to say that the Explorer has the best bracelet, almost there with the Ranger. And this is because the bracelet of the Rolex is totally amazing. This is the most comfortable bracelet that I have ever worn. The Summiteer is very close, surprisingly, and now it gets an 8, but maybe it should be a 9, like the Ranger. But the build, the solidity of the bracelets of the Explorer and the Ranger, it is great. The Explorer, it doesn't get a 10 because it doesn't have this micro adjust. It only has the Easy Link extension, which is good. It's good enough. I mean, it is excellent. The clasp is very secure and everything. And the Ranger does have this micro adjust, so it gets this 9 instead of an 8. Now the Summiteer has an 8, maybe only because of the build quality. It's not as good as the Explorer and the Ranger, of course, but it does now have a micro adjust clasp that I changed recently, which is great. And let's talk about the loser here, which is, of course, as you know, the Alpinist. The strap that comes with the Alpinist, the original genuine leather strap, you know what it is. It is in the box, and I have never put it on, not the previous owner of the watch. Here we have that the strap of the Alpinist is not good at all. So that's the reason I have this other bracelet that I got from a third party. I think it's a Miltat strap. Well, the good thing is that you can put other very nice straps that can look amazing with this watch. But when you got this watch new, the strap is no good in the Alpinist. And with all this said, let's see the final score of these watches. And here comes what I think is the surprise. I really thought that the Ranger would be one of the first or the second, together with the Summiteer, and I think I was right. Both are great watches in their respective price points, and the Ranger, it's really a really tough contender here because it's really designed, and the brand really believes that it is a watch that can be used in adventure, in true adventure and exploring situations. But I didn't expect to be the Explorer on par with the Alpinist. I don't know, maybe it should be higher, should be lower. It's really strange, really hard to understand why the Explorer and the Alpinist, I mean, they are quite far away from the Summiteer and the Ranger, but I think that both watches, they can be used. They really can be used in adventures, although I didn't believe that at the beginning, for the several reasons that I have been explaining. But yes, I mean, if the Explorer can have a score similar to the Alpinist, then you sure can use it in the mountain or in exploration or any other adventure. Of course you can. It's a very solid, reliable watch. That's the fact. But I think here there's one thing that we need to take into account. And I would say that the bracelet and the strap, the original bracelet and strap, is not as important as the rest of the features of the watches. So I'm going to remove this and to see what the score shows us. Because it is true. I mean, the important thing here is the watch head, because while in adventures you are most probably going to use an 8 or a single strap, or you should at least. That's my recommendation. Always being careful with not tightening it too much, because not to lose the watch if you hit it against something, it's very important. Once I take this factor away, once we take the bracelet away, then the scores are a little bit different. The Ranger is the first one, and close by is the Summiteer with only 10 points less, which makes both watches very compelling. And considering the price of the Summiteer, well, you can figure out, you can imagine what's your best option here. Then the Alpinist, which is a pure true adventure watch, only punished by the strap, by the original leather strap. And the Explorer doesn't remain as much as an exploring watch. It's more a watch that is really penalized by the case design, by the indentation and the lack or the fewer possibilities of changing straps. So this is my kind of semi-objective review of the situation with these watches. And yes, the Explorer loses as an adventure watch, but not by far, considering the bracelet and how reliable the movement is and everything. And if you have enough money, yes, you can use it, of course. But I don't think it's designed to be like that. Now, let's go back to the studio. Well, this has been the comparison. and I don't think it's too much of a surprise. I was expecting something similar, not quite like this, but that's the way it works when you try to be, objective or scientific or something like that. I still think that the Explorer is, for me, is the most beautiful watch that I own. I'm sure about that. But also at the same time, I realize it is not really the adventure exploring watch that it's supposed to be or it's marketed to be. The Explorer is what it is. It is a luxury piece, a true homage of the exploring watches of the past. I'm convinced about that. The thing is that it is so reliable, so comfortable. It's such a great watch by itself that, of course, you can use it for adventures. I'm sure about that. If you're not going to change the bracelet, if you have reasonable good eyesight, not like I do, this watch is going to be wonderful for anything. I'm really sure about that. But it is expensive. It's not designed to be a true adventure watch. The Ranger is. If you want something with high quality, with almost all of the features that you want in this type of watch, I think the Ranger is a really good option. But it's not fancy. It's not going to be in its place in other environments, in more formal or elegant occasions, because it's not. The Summiteer will work in many of those circumstances, but nobody is going to recognize the brand. And the Alpinist is great by itself. So I think all of the watches are great. They excel in some aspects, and they fail in others. That's the way. There is no perfect watch. But as I said, I'm going to make a comparison about all of these watches as watches by themselves. And their things are going to be a little bit different. So stay tuned. I think you're going to enjoy it. Until next time, bye-bye. Thank you.